Hi guys, it's time for the highly anticipated Week 2 Stardom Situm. I've got a bumper episode for you today. There is 10 matchups in total. Some very interesting ones, some very difficult ones I had to come up with, and then one from Phil. So the first one is Craig, who asked which receiver should he start from out of Moncrief, Cooks, and Cobb, and Aguilar as well. Moncrief is playing against the Broncos, who've got decent defense. Last week he picked up 6 receptions for 64 yards, 1 touchdown. Brandon Cooks is playing against the Giants. Everyone knows how the Saints-Giants game ended last year. It was a complete shootout. It finished 52-49, so I could see a similar situation this week. Maybe not as high scoring, but definitely a high scoring game. Saints scored 34 points last week and gave up 35. So I can see a similar situation happening where it's just going to turn into a shootout. I can see the Saints' entire season being like that, given that this week they're. But I'll get on to the Saints' defense later on, talking about the offense. So Cooks envision scoring a lot of points last week. He had 6 receptions, the same as Moncrief and Cobb actually, and he blew both of them out of the water. He doubled both of the yardage. 24 yards average, 2 touchdowns as well. Cobb is playing at the Vikings, which is an interesting one. He had averaging about 10 yards a catch last week. Didn't actually score any touchdowns. For the 4 receivers, he was the only one that didn't. Aguilar, coming into his second year in the league, he hasn't been spectacular yet, but he's fast, so he's got the ability to blow the top off the defense. For this, if I had to pick which of the receivers to go for, it would be Moncrief, Cooks, and Cobb. Leave Aguilar on the bench. He blows hot and cold. Don't know what way he's going to go each week, especially given the new quarterback, Carson Wentz, who, bear in mind, did play well last week, but you don't know if he's going to play the same way every week, given his first season anyway. Second one is Craig again. He's talking about which tight end to start. Barnage against the Ravens, or Virgil Green against the Colts. Barnage last week racked up a brilliant 0 catches. But given that there's now actually another change of quarterback for the Browns, went 15 seasons with multiple starting quarterbacks, there's a possibility that this is going to be a slight uptick, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really affect which you should start out of the two. Virgil Green, 4 receptions last week, 28 yards, didn't score any touchdowns, but he's still more productive than Barnage, and he's going to get you the receptions. So I'd go for Virgil Green in this case. The third one is Rob, who asked about his running backs. Whether it's Murray at the Lions, Rawls against the Rams, Crowell versus the Ravens, and Tevin Coleman at the Raiders. The first 3 had 13, 12, and 12 carries each, with Murray getting 42 yards, Rawls with 32, and Crowell with 62. Tevin Coleman had 8 carries and 22, but that's a job sharing one with Devonta Freeman over in Atlanta. The difference is Tevin Coleman is a pass catching back, so he's the third down kind of back, and he had 5 receptions for 95 yards last week, which is significantly higher than the other 3 running backs. Murray had 5 receptions, 35 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. Rawls had 3 receptions for 28 yards. Crowell had 2 receptions for 16. If I had to pick 2 running backs to start out of this, I would be leaning towards Tevin Coleman, simply because he's a pass catching back and he'll be using the passing game more than Crowell and Murray. And then the last one would be Thomas Rawls. Given that Thomas Rawls said this week, Bob Cordata from the Seattle Times said he's expecting him to have a full workload. That's what Pete Carroll said this week, so I would go with Rawls. And given that Rawls was fairly productive with minimal carries last week, he should be very productive this week, especially given Seattle are a run first offense. Okay, the next is Rob again, and he asked, should Tyler Lockett start in front of Evans, Benjamin, or Julio Jones? Lockett is at the Rams, and we all know how good of a defense the Rams have at the moment. Evans is at Arizona, who are trying to bounce back from that loss to New England. Benjamin plays San Francisco, and Julio Jones plays Oakland. Julio Jones wasn't as productive last week as a lot of people were expecting. 66 yards with 4 catches, quite a good high average, but you were expecting a lot more than 4 catches from him. He did score a very good touchdown, quite a long run, but during the game he's tweaked an ankle. He's had limited practice today, but the Atlanta Journal-Constitution said that he's limited practice, and mid of the week he should be okay towards the end of the week. It's worth noting that the Raiders gave up the most passing yards last week, but then again they were playing against the greatest quarterback ever to live, so that's sort of to be expected. Matt Ryan's going to throw the ball quite a bit, so I wouldn't be too surprised if Julio Jones went over the 100-yard mark. So that's the toss-up now between Evans at Arizona and Benjamin against San Francisco. Benjamin played more snaps than Ron Rivera wanted him to last week, and he had 6 receptions out of 12 attempts with 91 yards and a touchdown. He should be starting to break out very soon. Given the other receivers that the Panthers have, he should be okay. And then Evans, 5 receptions for 99 yards and a touchdown. I think for this week I would be taking Lockett at the Rams, just because it gives you the added dimension of kick returns as well, and that he's always a threat over the top. But I would keep an eye on the Julio Jones news at the minute and see whether his limited practice becomes full practice or it stays limited towards the end of the week. So if he stays limited, his action will be limited at the weekend, so keep that in mind. The next up we have Nige, who asked Zach Ertz at the Bears or Eric Ebron at the Titans. I've been a fan of Eric Ebron since he came out of college. Not a fan of his college team, don't like UNC. But he had 5 catches from 5 targets last week, 46 yards and a touchdown, which isn't bad. But the reason I would start him this week is that Zach Ertz has a rib displacement in the collarbone area, and he is considered week to week by Philly.com, so I would stay away from that completely. Let Eric Ebron take over the points. He'll get the receptions. He'll be hit for a touchdown every so often. So it's worth just sticking out with Eric Ebron and letting them points take over. Next one is Dave is asking which quarterback should he start. Carson Palmer against Tampa Bay or Drew Brees at the Giants. I spoke earlier about the Saints and Giants and how last year was a massive shootout, and I expect something very similar this week. Drew Brees threw for 400 plus yards last week, 4 touchdowns. Palmer threw 271 and 2 touchdowns. But given that just the fact that the Saints are pass happy offense, and I expect it to be a blowout a shootout, just because the Saints defense is that bad that the Saints are going to have to keep throwing the ball, and they're probably going to end up chasing the game at one point. Given that the Saints 1, 2 and 3 cornerbacks didn't play a snap in the NFL last season, the Giants should be able to score points, and the Saints are going to have to catch up. So I would go for Drew Brees, only because he's probably going to throw for 300-400 yards again. The next one up is which tight end? Jimmy Graham at the Rams, Julius Thomas at the Chargers, or Jordan Cameron at the Patriots. Um, I'm still not sold on Jimmy Graham since he's left the Saints. He's not the target that he was when he was playing with Drew Brees. The Saints play a completely different offense than Seattle do, and the Saints love passing to the tight end. Ben Watson turned into a star last year. Kobe Fleener's going to turn into a star this year, Phil. And Jimmy Graham's coming off a pretty bad injury. He only had one reception last week for 11 yards, and I don't see him being productive quite yet for the Seahawks. Jordan Cameron last week had 2 receptions, 3 targets for 6 yards. He had problems in the preseason with Ryan Tannehill, and I don't see it improving. Didn't improve week 1, don't see why it would improve week 2. So that leaves really Julius Thomas as a clear outright winner. He did have a sprained ankle at the end of the game against the Packers, but he has practiced this week, most recently today, and he should be playing against the Chargers. I would keep an eye on whether that situation changes, but if he's listed, I would just keep on top of whether he's playing and how much he's practicing this week. But at the minute, I would say go with Julius Thomas unless that changes, and he's going to get a touchdown. He's going to be a big target. And rookie quarterbacks love their tight ends because it's a safety net. The next one is Matty, who gave me this at the last minute. Thank you, Matty. And he wants to go with his wide receiver, seeing as Keenan Allen is no more. So he wanted Terrell Williams against Jacksonville, Eli Rogers against the Bengals, or Kenny Stills against the Patriots. Terrell Williams is a guy that Dave spoke about in his waiver wire pickups. He had 2 receptions for 71 yards last week, and given that Keenan Allen's gone down, he's probably going to see more snaps. He's going to get more chances. Eli Rogers last week had 6 receptions for 59 yards, 1 touchdown. And Kenny Stills had 1 of 5, and I think most of us have seen that drop he had. He was in the middle of the field, and I think that's going to lose a lot of confidence from Ryan Tannehill. He's not going to like throwing them. Kenny Stills is always going to be a threat over the top. Whether he's going to be used that much, I don't know. Devontae Parker's still out, but then big drops are going to make Ryan Tannehill a bit more wary of whether they should pass it to him or not, whether he should go. And Jarvis Landry's always going to get the quick ones. He's always going to be the slot receiver getting them. So this is probably the toughest one out of all of them so far, and I would say I'm edging towards Eli Rogers only because the attention Antonio Brown's going to get, and Antonio Brown's going to take cornerbacks out of the game, and he's going to give Eli Rogers the chance. And last but not least, Phil asked whether the suspended Lev Bell or the hospitalised Chris Avery should start. Fuck you, Phil.